So I think Skittles are maybe one of my favorite candies. And Skittles is really five different candies altogether, and they're kind of in tiers. You've got the top two, clearly the cherry and the grape. And then you've got kind of your middle tier that they're solid candies there, and your lemon and your orange. And then you've got the one random one that doesn't really seem to fit with the others, and that's the lime. Well, I think Skittles are maybe the perfect analogy for describing a division in baseball. Hello and welcome back to Getaway Day. As always, I am Mason, he is Gautam, and we are here to talk about the American League West. It is maybe one of the most intriguing divisions in baseball in 2023. Is that fair to say?
I think definitely yes. With all the intrigue around the Angels, the Rangers kind of accelerating their timeline to being good, the Astros always being good, and then whatever that is that's going on in Oakland this year.
Yeah. Yeah, Oakland is definitely they're the lime skittle, of the American League West. I think that's fair to say. You rank the others however you want, but I don't think anyone in their mind can put the A's at anything different. So we're gonna go and do kind of a deep dive on the American League West today. Kind of an update on our division preview from prior to the season. We did both listen to that episode today. We're gonna kind of call out some things that we got correct, some things that we got incorrect. Um, some new things that we hadn't even considered at the time, kind of how the division got to where it is today. Before we get into that, we do have this week in baseball. We're going to talk some no hitters, some pretty big series or a pretty big series here with two contenders, and about some situational baseball. So, I guess before we get into that, Gautam, how are you? How was your week? Did you watch any good baseball? What's going on?
I actually did watch less baseball than usual this weekend. I was entertaining some family in town this weekend, so I'm very busy. But it was a really good weekend, and now I got to dive back into the baseball.
Good deal. Yeah, I kind of took a week off this weekend as well. Just kind of hung out in my hotel. I played video games for the first time in about a week, and then just did that maybe a little too much, and watched some Criminal Minds, trying to get through a binge. So, but yeah, so now I'm kind of back into it too. So let's start with this week in baseball, and I think the biggest news is very clearly Michael Lorenzen in his first home start for the Phillies wearing Vans as or for cleats, goes out and throws a no hitter on 101
24, I believe.
124 pitches. Uh, he dominated that game, and I'm a little bit confused because Michael Lorenzen's career has been all over the place. So just the fact that he threw a no hitter is really, really impressive. This is a guy who was a starter for a really short period of time with the Reds, and then he moved into the bullpen, and he was a really good reliever. And then they decided that he was actually a fairly good hitter for a pitcher, so they would use him as in pinch hitting situations. This is a guy that would come in uh, as a pinch hitter and then go play center field so that he could come in and pitch. And so they kind of were using him as a two-way player, thought that maybe they would try and do that a little bit more when the two-way player rules came into effect. They didn't. He goes over to San Francisco and they start stretching him out and using him as a starter again. Then
San
goes to
Francisco. He went to the Angels
he went to the Angels?
last year. Last year.
Was he not on San Francisco before that?
Don't think so.
Am I just making things up?
Maybe you're mixing up Anthony Desclafani. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yep, you got me. Goes to the Angels. They stretch him out as a starter. Not really all that great. Then he goes
But
to
he actually did show some promise. Like he impressed me last year. The fact that he hadn't started since 2015, and then he started doing it, and he was actually pretty good when he actually pitched. Um,
so How many innings did he end up throwing last year? Do you know? Because I think that's like the biggest thing for me is just the fact that this is a guy who hadn't thrown bulk innings in a long time until
Yeah.
age 30, really. Let's see, he threw 122 innings last year, 97 the year before, and then hadn't thrown more than 83 innings since his rookie season. But yeah, and so he goes to Detroit this year, becomes, as Gautam put it, their token all star. Um, and I mean, he's kind of right. Like, he wasn't really all that great let's see, let me get the partial seasons pulled up here. He had a 358 ERA, which is very respectable. Not a big strikeout guy, but never has been really. Um, he's actually controlled walks more than he had in the past. So he had a fairly decent season pitching 18 games for the Tigers. Then he comes over to Philly and he's made two starts. He made a start on the road and then the no hitter. And this is easily the best season of his career. Um, just looking at his stat page. And none of it really makes sense to me because I would have never pegged this guy to be the guy to go the distance 124 pitches in any game ever,
Yeah, he's
let
never pitched a
alone.
complete game. He's made it to the ninth inning like one other time, I believe. Actually, his first Philly start was an 8 inning start, so he's kind of like hot right now, and it's kind of cool to watch.
So, it, is it? Do you think it's kind of adrenaline based being on a team that's actually got a chance to do something here? Because like Philly
I
is.
don't want to just chalk it up to adrenaline and being thrown into the like heat of the playoff race because even in his last starts with the Tigers, he was looking really good. I think he's kind of unlocked something and he's staying healthy and obviously a talented pitcher. It's just he hasn't done
Oh
the
yeah,
starting thing a whole lot, and that's what it feels like it is. That maybe he's like found an actual sustainable level of being a very high quality major league starter. Obviously, you're not going to throw a no hitter or 8 innings every time out, but
yeah.
he's good.
Yeah, and that's fair. And so I kind of had a reaction right after it happened that might be a little unfair, but I kind of wanted to bring it up just to get your opinion on it. I kind of likened the Lorenzen no hitter to being like the Dallas Braden or Philip Humber perfect games of just regular no hitters. Like it's the guy that like he's a talented pitcher, you would never in a million years expect it. And honestly, it still feels really, really fluky and weird because this is just very out of character for him over the course of his career.
I feel like there's way worse guys that have thrown actual no hitters. There have been a lot of guys who have thrown no hitters. Alec Mills threw a no hitter in 2020. Like
That's, yeah, that's fair. All right. So maybe it was an unfair comp for me to make.
Edwin
But
Jackson threw a no hitter where he had 8 walks and it took him 149 pitches.
that'd be like Jack Flaherty throwing a no hitter this year.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, but that was it was a really, really cool game to see. I did actually get to tune in for the last about 6 outs, I think, of that. And he was hyped, as he should have been. But I think just even probably for him, the fact that he was able to do that, given how his career had progressed, I think that's probably got to be make that even sweeter, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah. And I just want to tackle it from a different angle, the Phillies angle, where we kind of gave some small level of praise to the Phillies for going out and getting Michael Lorenzen, but they're getting immediate benefit from it. And it just looks so smart because it wasn't necessarily like a major hole in the Phillies, you know, team. They had really top line starting pitching, but they added to it, and now they're looking like really good, like top 5 starting pitcher in the league at this point.
Yeah, and it didn't look like your typical um, Dave Dombrowski move either. Like it looked just very normal GM that doesn't like to go make these big flashy moves for big veterans. Like this was a logical, smart baseball move just in general, and it's paying off huge so far. Like
Yeah.
very out of characteristic for Dave Dombrowski, but fantastic move. You gotta applaud the dude.
And I feel like quietly the Phillies are looking like one of the best teams. They're kind of showing like what they did a year ago where they got really hot in the second half. Their whole lineup can really start to click if guys like Trey Turner and Bryce Harper get going, then why can't they go make another run? They have the starting pitching, they have a really good bullpen this year, and I mean, good team.
Yeah, and I'm just looking kind of at the splits for their record, and I'm noticing a couple of things. One, they're really good at home. Like the Phillies dominate at home. They've got 10 more wins than losses. They've only actually they're about 500 on the road. Um, but then teams that are greater than 500 this year, they're 37 and 37, meaning they're dominating the bad teams. They're playing 500 ball against the good teams. And that's really kind of what you need to be in order to get yourself to the postseason and then be able to go on a run. Because you can play with the big boys. You're proving it. You're not dominating them. Like you're not the Braves going 40 and 25 against teams above 500. But not many teams are at a 640 winning percentage either. So you wouldn't really expect yourself to be the Braves. And so you're seeing these Phillies go out and do exactly what needs to be done in order to put themselves in a position to get back to the World Series this year. It's not like they're fluking their way to being in the wild card. It's not like they've been terrible all year and just all of a sudden are getting hot. Like they've been a good team all year. They're getting better, and that's exactly what you want to see. All right. So also this week, we had a pretty big series between two American League contenders in I believe, the American League leader, the Baltimore Orioles, and a team that is fighting for a wild card. They're actually 1.5 games back of the third wild card spot as of today, and that is the Seattle Mariners. Gowie, you want to take us into that series there a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. This series was played with a lot of intensity. The Mariners we're going to talk about them a little bit later on in this episode, but they are starting to get things going, and they were on a big winning streak heading into the series. They won on Friday, kind of a big win to start the series. The game on Saturday um, was very intriguing because George Kirby went out and he pitched 9 scoreless innings with 7 strikeouts. You don't really see pitchers go out and pitch 9 shutout innings every day. The thing is, he was matched, just about matched by Cole Irvin and then a whole bunch of Baltimore relievers: Bauman, Webb, Perez, Cano, Felix Bautista, and then specifically Felix Bautista is what I want to mention because he finished this game off after Baltimore scored in the top of the 10th. He was going to pitch his second inning, and he goes in there and he's just throwing 102-mile-per-hour darts at the bottom of the zone, and it's incredibly impressive. I think if there's like any one pitcher to watch in baseball this season for one single inning, it is Felix Bautista. It's just freakish what he's doing right now. He's striking out about 50% of the batters that he faced. He went ahead and struck out the side there for a 2 inning win, and Mariners took that one. Or sorry, Orioles took that one. The last game of the series, also insane and very close. Cedric Mullins ended up having one of the best catches of this entire season, robbing a home run in the ninth inning to keep it a one-run game. The very next batter, new acquisition for the Mariners, Dominic Canzone, hits a moonshot second decker home run to tie the game, goes into extra innings, and then Mullins, who had just made the sensational catch, hits a 2-run homer to give them the lead that they would not give up, and the Mariners ended up losing 2 of 3 of that series, but it was so close. All the games were, or those last 2 games were just extremely close, and I would love to see these 2 teams match up in a longer playoff series.
Yeah, and if you're an M's fan, like you've got to be frustrated being out of a wild card spot right now, game and a half back, losing or losing a series, but losing this particular series against this particular team and playing the way that you did, you have to be proud of that. That is an incredibly difficult team to beat this year, and they played incredibly well. And that series, like they didn't get swept, so they're still right in it. I think they might be the closest team to they're the closest team to a wild card spot that's not currently sitting in one.
Yeah,
Um,
right now it really feels like it's going to be a battle between Toronto and Seattle. There are other teams involved, but those are the 2 teams that are 3rd and 4th in the wild card standings at the moment. So I can really see that going down to the wire. I couldn't pick between those 2 teams which one I think is better. I feel like it's just a coin flip.
yeah, and I think those two teams are just kind of entirely different too. Like the Blue Jays are more your offensive juggernaut team. They're struggling this year, but so they're
Yeah.
not like not really a juggernaut, but it's more what you would typify as that. And the Mariners are this just pitching dominant team um, that just suppresses their opponents. And so you've got two entirely different style of teams, so it's incredibly hard to compare them. But it'll be fun coming down to the wire here. Like you would assume Tampa and Houston, being as good as they are going to maintain their or wild card spots, really leaving it like a 6 team race for that last wild card spot because you've got Boston 3 games out, you got the Yankees 5 games out, you got the Angels 6.5 games out. So you got 4 teams that are vying for all this one spot. But it really does feel like it's going to come down to Toronto or Seattle. All right. So, do you have anything else that you would like to talk about in this week in baseball?
Yeah, I thought we'd do something a little bit different and talk about a specific situation that happened in a game. Just talk through the strategy of it. I thought that would be kind of a different thing to take on this week. So this situation comes from the Cubs and Mets game on Wednesday. It was a 2-run game. The Mets were up by 2. Adam Ottavino comes in for the save. Very first batter, Seiya Suzuki hits a home run. So it's a 4-3 game now. The next batter, Candelario hits a single. Mike Talkman walks. Um, so you got runners on first and second with no outs, and you've got a pinch hitter by David Ross, Nick Madrigal coming up to bat. Buck Showalter counters by pulling Adam Ottavino from the game and putting in Phil Bickford. So first and second, no outs. Madrigal to the plate. Uh, Big contact guy, doesn't strike out a lot. Behind him, you've got Christopher Morel, who does strike out a lot. And Bickford is a guy that gets a lot of swings and misses. So he is kind of shooting for the strikeout. So it's extremely like exaggerated in that direction, I would say.
Bickford is also the guy that you have to worry about because he gave up home run number 700 to Albert Pujols. So he does give up the occasional long ball.
Yeah. So the question is, what do you do in this situation? With your contact guy up, 2 runners on base, you're down by 1. Do you lay down the bunt like David Ross did, or do you let Madrigal swing away and hope that he can hit a single and score a run?
How many outs was it?
No outs.
No outs, runners on first and second. Nick
Yep.
Madrigal. I
And
mean,
Morel's coming up to bat next.
yeah, I feel like you would let him swing away in most cases. Like I would. Like Madrigal is
I
a contact
personally, I'm on
oriented
that side
guy.
too. A guy like Madrigal, he's a pretty fast runner, so the risk of him getting doubled up is a little bit lower, I would say, than the average player. And makes a lot of contact. That's like a great chance to get the run home without basically making the key at bat Morel, which is what actually happened because Madrigal did lay down the bunt. It was successful, so you've got runners on second and third with one out. Um, and Morel came up and he struck out, which is not super surprising. And then you're left with one. Well, then you got Horner coming up, who's another contact guy, which is not the worst guy to have up. He ended up walking, and then you're up to Ian Happ, which is like in David Ross's defense for what he actually did. He did have his middle of order lineup guys coming up to bat in that situation. So I get it from that perspective, but I also wouldn't have given up the out. I would have just wanted one more crack to get that one run home to tie the game.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because like I probably also would have let him swing. However, it does make sense to me to lay down the sack bunt there because Madrigal's probably the guy that you would trust the most to lay down a bunt. It's not like if he gets out, you're not going to try and bunt to advance the runners to second and third with one out. Like it's the prime opportunity to move them and still give yourself one shot for a sac fly with Morel to score the run, or a hit, or a home run, or whatever. You still have two guys behind you, and you just have to advance the one base to score. So it makes a lot of sense in my mind. I still would have let him swing, but I understand the logic between having him bunt.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I think I'm with you.
Yeah, that is an interesting situation. So how'd that game end up?
So that was the end of the game. So Horner walked to load the bases with two outs, and then Hap struck out, and that was the game.
Okay, so in that case, if it were the seventh inning, I probably would have let him bunt. But knowing, I guess, realizing that that's the ninth, I probably would have let him swing away. Like you have to score the run or you lose.
Yeah.
So
But you can also make the case that that's the reason they did bunt because they knew that they just needed one, and in that situation to actually keep the game going.
yeah,
But
that's
but like it's a run expectancy thing. Like how much does it improve your chances of scoring when you've got second and third with one out versus first and second and no outs?
and
That's
it's
what it
not
really comes down
and
to.
it's not like you just intentionally walk somebody with the bases loaded. So I guess God, it's been a while since we've been able to talk about something stupid like that. Can we get Tony and Joe Madden back, please?
Yeah,
I
let's
I
do
need
it.
I need stupid decisions from managers here.
Who's the stupidest manager in the league left?
That's
These guys are getting too smart. That's what I'm saying.
is it
We need
Buck?
some old school guys back. Buck?
Is Buck the dumb guy?
I feel like Buck is smart with the strategy usually, though.
Oh, you know what? You know who it is. It's the guy that I don't know his name, but he replaced not Phil Nevin. What's his name? The new A's manager.
Oh, Mark Kotze?
Yeah, I think Kotze is the dumb one.
Okay.
Oh no,
He doesn't have
actually
much
no.
to
Wait,
work with.
I do actually know who the answer is. I just don't want to offend half of our listeners because it's definitely Aaron Boone. Um, Aaron Boone is not a smart man. He makes boneheaded decisions all the time, and I can actually back that up. Like the rest of the guys, I'm just throwing names out to throw them out, but I think he's actually the dumbest dumbest manager. But oh well. All right, so what do you say we get into our main topic here? And that is the American League West. So, as I kind of mentioned at the top of the show, the American League West kind of reminds me of a bag of Skittles. You've got 5 different flavors. You've got a couple different tiers of flavors, a couple different tiers of teams here. And those tiers are kind of set by the standings, but you can kind of look at the standings and see the clear distinction here too. You've got the two dominating teams, your grape and your cherry or strawberry or whatever the red one is, um, in Texas and Houston. And we talked a lot about these teams at the beginning of the year, in our preview. And Houston, I think, is who we both expected to win this division, right?
Not just us, I think everybody had Houston as number 1. It's hard to pick against your defending World Series champion.
Yeah, that's fair. And so let's start with Houston and Texas, but mostly start with Houston because they're the defending champs. So, what did we get right and what did we get wrong in the preview episode about the Houston Astros? I know something that we got very wrong is their big offseason acquisition in Jose Abreu. We expected to be pretty good, a big upgrade on the offensive side of the ball, um, from guys that they were trying to put at first base last year. Yuli Gurriel, Trey Mancini. Um, who's the third one? There was another one.
Christian Vasquez.
Yeah, Christian Vasquez. And Jose Abreu would come in, and last year he increased his walk rate, even though his power kind of gone down. And we thought that that was going to help him sustain his level of hitting ability as he aged. Like he's 36 years old now, and unfortunately, that's not been the case. It took him a long time to get his first home run this season. He has managed to put up 10 since then, but his walk rate's back down to 6%, strikeout rate of 22%. He's been horrible both like defensively and offensively, really. His average is down at 234. Like Abreu has not been the upgrade that we thought he was going to be at first base for this Astros team.
Yeah, he's never been anything like this in his career. He's always been like well above average, as many first basemen are. This year, he's just been dreadful, and I think we have maybe a little bit of an explanation of why now that he's on the injured list with back inflammation that apparently he's been playing through since at least the All Star break. Maybe that's been going on for longer than that. Um, but yeah, they're getting negative production. Like it's not even, hey, he's kind of worse than before, but he's average. No, he's like actively been terrible for this team, and the
Yeah,
rest of the
he
guys are keeping the team afloat on offense.
so Abreu is one of the worst hitters in baseball this year. He's put up minus
Yeah,
1.3 WAR, and he's a first baseman, so there's not really a huge defensive component to the WAR there. But basically, everything that Jeremy Pena has done to help the team, Jose Abreu has pretty much just completely eviscerated that and taken it away with how much that he's been a detriment to this team in the lineup, which is really unfortunate because Jose Abreu is probably one of the most likable players in the league. Like he's
yeah.
always been
It
good. He's
just
always been
simply didn't
quiet.
work out.
Yeah.
It just sometimes that happens, and it's like kind of shocking that it happened this quickly. But it can definitely it's the risk in an older player, I guess, that they could just tomorrow they'll wake up and they just don't they're not good at baseball anymore.
Yeah. The game ends for
But
everybody at some point. For some, it ends earlier than others.
I feel like we should talk about some of the other guys that keep the Astros where they are, and it starts with Kyle Tucker and Jordan Alvarez. Those guys, when they play, they're phenomenal. Kyle Tucker is probably the most underrated superstar in the league, I would say, at this point.
So I've
Like
been calling
year
for
in year,
Kyle Tucker MVP season for a couple years now. And if there weren't this pesky Shohei guy, I feel like Tucker would be in the conversation this year, would he not?
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna be like that for the next 5 plus years, where he just every year he's gonna put up amazing numbers, but he's not necessarily gonna be the number one guy. But maybe one of these years he's gonna have that MVP season. And
Yeah, it's like
quietly, Jose Altuve too. When he's played, he's been great again. We talked about the year that he was coming off, which was fantastic, even though he was an older kind of guy. This year, he's once again playing great, and
well, and
they
and
need him.
Altuve has only played in 48 games this year, and
Yeah.
he is fourth on the team in WAR out of their hitters, with almost. Sorry, I got the hiccups all of a sudden. This is going to be annoying. He's got almost 3 WAR in 48 games, which is absolutely nuts. That's very. Uh, this is a term that we're going to coin. Very Galakian. So, oh, you know what? We completely forgot to come up with the secret phrase for today. Oops. All right. Sorry. Moving on. But yes, Altuve's season is very Galakian with 2.7 WAR in 48 games and what 9 homers, 11 stolen bases, and he's been on the shelf most of the year. So him being back, being healthy is huge for this team. And like then you've also got kind of the I don't know if I want to call it the breakout of Chas McCormick. I,
I'll
I guess
call it
yeah, it
breakout.
would like you got the breakout of Chas McCormick, a guy who's uh he's got 15 home runs, 13 stolen bases in 76 games. Like he's hitting 280, and this is a guy that I think we didn't really expect to be more than like a typical center fielder, maybe. But like he's figured out how to pull the ball. Last year he hit it pretty well to all fields, about 35%, 35%, and 30%. This year he's pulling the ball 45% of the time. So almost half the batted balls he has go towards the Crawford boxes, and it's shown in his power numbers with him hitting 15 home runs. Whereas last year, I don't remember exactly. Let's see. Last year he had 14 home runs in 119 games. So he is way outpacing himself from last year. Um, and that's, I think you'd have to attribute it all to the pull, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think a lot of players we've seen have success with this kind of approach when they don't, you know, hit the ball really hard. Like the guys that come to mind are his teammate Alex Bregman, who's been doing this a lot in his career. Guys like Nolan Arenado, Jose Ramirez don't barrel a ton of balls, but they make a lot of contact. Actually, McCormick makes a lot less contact than those guys, but they all don't hit the ball at the very top of the exit velocity scale, but they all hit a lot of pulled fly balls, and that gets them the home runs every year, basically.
Yeah, it's a less extreme version of Nolan Arenado because that's kind of how Arenado hits all his home runs too. Him and Jose Ramirez, they're both like pull fly ball gods.
Yep.
Like, and honestly, 15 home runs in 76 games. Chas McCormick is kind of on pace to be about what those two are. So maybe that's less of a odd comp than I thought. Hmm. All right then. Uh, but I think something else we should talk about here with the Astros before we move on is some of their pitching because in our preview episode that was their strength. Period. We talked about them losing Justin Verlander and how that was going to be a big hit, but they were trying to replace him with the young gun Hunter Brown, who is essentially the wait are they is Hunter Brown a righty?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. He's essentially, I think we comped him to like rookie Justin Verlander. Like he pitches a very similar way. Like his arm action is pretty much the same as Verlander's. And he had success really early on last year. Well, he has been their second best pitcher all season, putting up his ERA doesn't really show it with a 4.23 and a 3.93 FIP, but he has put up 2.1 WAR and carried a lot of innings at 123. That actually puts him second on the team in innings pitched. So he's been bit by the home run ball, and that is kind of the reason for his high FIP, high ERA. But the rest of his stuff is really, really good. And you could definitely expect to see improvement there and see him be just as good as Fromber, Christian Javier, and the guy who came back, Justin Verlander, at the trade deadline. So
Yeah.
this team took their pitching that was already a strength and has added to it more to go on the stretch run. So it'll be really interesting to see how this rotation goes here in the coming weeks, because I know JP France is a guy that I didn't expect to be in this rotation at all, let alone throw 100 innings and be their third best starter. So
Yeah, it feels like every year the Astros usually have one guy like that. So years ago it was like a Framber, and then last year it was Christian Javier. And like 2021, it was Luis Garcia, who's actually out for the season with Tommy John. So they find ways to get the depth that they need for their starting pitching. This year it feels a little bit thinner than before because they don't have Garcia. Lance McCullers is out for the season. Christian Javier seems to have taken a step back, actually. So that feels like a little bit of a weak point in this Astros team, but overall, still an extremely strong team. And they feel like the second place team among all second place teams right now that has the best chance of overtaking the team in first, I would say.
yeah, and part of that is the fact that they're only 2.5 games out, and I think that is the closest out of any second place team. Tampa's 3 out, and Cleveland is 4.5 out. But yeah, I think you're right on. They feel like the team that is most primed to take over the top spot. Um,
But let's talk about those Texas Rangers.
yeah, these Texas Rangers. This is the grape skittle. I love this Texas Rangers team. So this team we lauded in the offseason for their moves. They went out, they got Nate Eovaldi, they got Jacob deGrom, and they really bolstered this rotation to go and complement a middle infield that they had built last season in Simeon and Seager. Well, things didn't really go as they expected. DeGrom ends up having to get Tommy John again. Nate Eovaldi hit the IL for quite a long
Hey, hey,
time.
hey! I think you're like jumping ahead a little too far. The
Am I?
Rangers are number one in starting pitcher ERA this season, so
Yeah,
we have to talk about
yes,
the
but
success first, right?
well, I was gonna
You're saying
talk about
things didn't go as planned. They kind of
well,
did. They went better than planned.
they didn't go according to the script. They went well. They didn't go according to the script because the script was you bring in Nate Eovaldi and Jacob deGrom, and you lean on them to carry your rotation throughout the season and be absolutely dominant. Well, that didn't happen. Both those guys have been injured more than they've been healthy. DeGrom's out for the season.
Not Evaldi. Evaldi's been healthy most of the year. He's been out for the last few weeks here.
He's been hurt a decent amount, dude. Like,
He's been out for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe.
yeah, fine, whatever. But point stands. You go spend a lot of money on the rotation, and then a fairly good amount of that money is sitting on the shelf. Yet they have one of the best run differentials in the league this year. Part of that is their hitting, but a significant amount of it is the fact that they are just really, really good at pitching. Like it's hard to have a great run differential if you're only good at one. And this Rangers team, who's been the fill in for DeGrom? Take us through the rotation and how good they've been.
Yeah, so they're getting a lot of contributions from like a lot of people. I feel like Dane Dunning recently has stepped up a lot. He's had 3 amazing starts in a row after kind of skating his way through most of the season. Kind of had some bad stretches, some good stretches, but maybe he's like a guy they can actually count on. Uh, Obviously, they traded for Max Scherzer, and he's been good since he's joined the Rangers. We talked about their depth at the beginning of the season, that they had other guys that could step in. They haven't really got those guys from the minors, but going out and actually at the trade deadline, seeing that weakness in starting pitcher because of the injuries, they go get Jordan Montgomery and Max Scherzer. I think they had such a good trade deadline from that perspective that they actually filled their need, and they
Yeah,
got two guys that are going to start playoff games for them if they make the playoffs.
yeah, 100%. Like one of those guys kind of fills the role that was left vacant by DeGrom's elbow just kind of giving out again. And then the other guy basically moves Martin Perez into a bullpen role. And Martin Perez was the Achilles heel of that rotation. I mean, after last year's phenomenal season for Martin Perez, like credit to him. He was phenomenal last year. But he came back down to earth this year. He's his home runs per 9, which we talked about a lot last year because it was so unnaturally low. Like a point 0.6, I think, for the last season. It's a 1.5 this year. So it's very high. And that's kind of the Martin Perez that we expected. He's back to that. And so bringing in Jordan Montgomery, a guy who is, um, he's a very, very good pitcher. He's a very um, dependable and consistent pitcher. Like he doesn't have very many blow up starts, but he doesn't really have very many dominant starts either. He's going to give up 2 runs a game, maybe 3, but he's going to give you a chance to win every time. And so being able to supplant a Martin Perez that sometimes is amazing and sometimes is very much not, with a guy as dependable and consistent as Montgomery, that's a huge upgrade right there, especially as you're coming into a playoff race, especially as you're trying to get the division crown here and fend off this Astros team that they can play ball. They've proven it in 2017, in 2021, and 20. There was another one I feel like 2019. No, they went to the World Series. They didn't win it. That was the Nationals. But it's an Astros team that has proven that they can make it deep in the postseason, and so this Rangers team is just trying to hold them off, and they made the right moves to be able to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess like if we go at the beginning of the season, at that point in time, we saw all the work that they put into improving the pitching. So them actually having better pitching, the way that they got there maybe is a little bit surprising. We didn't know it was going to turn out quite like this, but if I told you, hey, the Rangers are going to have the kind of the eighth best starting pitcher FIP this season, you'd say, okay, that checks out. That I could
Yeah,
believe that. But I think we should talk about their offense. That's just been absolutely mashing all season long,
this is the
and I
second best
appreciate you
offense in the
giving
majors,
them
isn't it?
a lot of credit for their pitching and everything. But the reason their run differential is so good is because their offense is unmatched in the American League, and the Braves get all the hype for being this incredible historic offense. The Rangers are really not that far behind the Braves in terms of runs scored, WRC plus. They've got similar walk rates and strikeout rates. Like they are every bit as good, almost every bit as good as the
And they're
Braves offense.
and they're doing it with less big names.
Yeah,
Like
and
they've
that's why
got
they probably don't get the hype.
yeah, they've got Marcus Simeon and Corey Seager, the two guys that they spent $1 billion on here last offseason, a year and a half ago. Um, but Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Ezekiel Duran, these guys have been key in this offense this year. And I think we talked about Jonah Heim in the preseason episode and how he was primed to be a really, really good and important young piece for them at catcher. But like he's gone out and kind of blown away all of my expectations even. Like this is a guy that at the catcher position, he's hitting about 280 with 14 home runs in 91 games. He's put up almost 3.5 WAR and made the All Star game as the starter, I believe. Right?
Mhm.
And just he's been every bit and more of what we expected. Then you throw in
Definitely.
the young corner infielder and Josh Young, and he's been phenomenal. His numbers are pretty much identical to Jonah Heim with a little bit more, a few more home runs, but a few more games played. Um, like they're the same down to their WRC plus and their WOBA. Like these guys are pretty much carbon copies of one another. If you look at their stat lines and give them the same number of games played, it's phenomenal. You've got Ezekiel Duran, who whenever Simeon or Seager go down, which Seager's been on the IL a couple of times this year, um,
Yeah.
Ezekiel
I think
Duran
he's
has
been a
stepped
huge
in.
key because yeah, he's filled in at shortstop. He's also played first base. He's played second base. He's playing third base now that Josh Young is going to be out for many weeks. He's
Mm-hmm.
played the corner outfields. Um, he's basically a guy that's plugged in anywhere around the diamond all season long, and he's putting up 20% better than league average statistics, and that's what makes a good team when you've got depth guys that can move around, fill in for guys when they get hurt, and you're not missing a beat basically with any of these guys. And they've seen other underappreciated seasons from Leody Taveras, Travis Jankowski, who's randomly having an amazing season. Um, this lineup just crushes it, and I can't say that I saw this coming to this extent.
Yeah, not to this extent, for sure. I definitely thought this was going to be a much improved team. I thought that the contributions would come from a couple different places than they did. I think I was big on their prospect Luis Angel Acuna. Thought he was going to come up late in the season and be maybe an X factor for this team as they make a playoff run. Well, turns out they traded him to the Mets in order to get Scherzer, and it didn't matter. They're they're the second best offense in baseball,
And
and
he's a middle infielder. He was kind of blocked. It
yeah.
made sense to move him
So
for now. This team is stacked and wants to win now. It's not like he doesn't matter. Like he helps them, but in a trade way.
yeah. All right, let's spend a little time talking about kind of our middle tier of teams, and that would be, in my opinion, the lemon of the Skittles, Seattle Mariners. Third best flavor in the bag. Uh, this Mariners team is pretty much, I don't want to say exactly what we predicted, but they're pretty close. Like we expected their bull or not their bullpen, their rotation to be phenomenal. And Gautam, how would you describe how their rotation has been this year?
Phenomenal. It's very impressive what they've done.
Yeah, so we expected phenomenal, we got phenomenal, and they are doing it in a little bit different way than I expected. I thought last year's trade deadline acquisition in Luis Castillo, I thought he would spend another year as the ace before kind of handing that off. But no, George Kirby and Logan Gilbert both took steps forward again and have taken over the top of this rotation. Luis Castillo's a number three now, and
Yeah, he's
that's a
legitimately like he's having a down year. Maybe you could say he's having a down year, but he's still a great pitcher to
he's having a
have. And when
down
he's at
year with
the
a 3.14 ERA. Like
yeah, when
that's
he's your
pretty
middle guy
good.
in your rotation, like you're stacked. Imagine this team in a playoff series and Luis Castillo's like pitching game 3 or something.
Yeah, that's an X factor. Having
Yeah.
that guy going up against a number three for any other team, you would put your money on Castillo to go deeper and to give his team a
Clearly,
better
yeah,
chance
I
to.
I want to talk even more about this the way that they develop their pitchers. It's insane. You mentioned a guy like Emerson Hancock, who was a top 10 pick a few years ago, huge prospect. He's just been promoted and made his first start, I think.
Yep.
Um, but he wasn't the first rookie starter to make their debut for the Mariners this year. The first two guys were Bryce Miller and Brian Moo, who have just really kind of come out of nowhere, and it's like a pitching factory in Seattle. All these guys have been drafted in the last like 4 or 5 years here, and they're already in the majors and they're contributing basically from day one. Um, no other team has had this much success with developing homegrown pitchers like in a very long time, I would say.
This is exactly what the Royals thought they were doing when they had like 4 first round pitchers all in that same season,
Yeah,
and none of them panned out. But Seattle has come over, and in my opinion, they have taken the title of pitching factory away from Cleveland. Like, this has just been
well,
phenomenal what they've been able to do. Like,
yeah,
Emerson Hancock, 5 innings in his debut, and he gave up what, like 2 runs or something like that? 1 run, 2 runs.
yeah,
Like, he pitched really, really well. He was a bit wild, but he's more of a stuff than control guy anyway. So not really all that shocking. But yeah, you see what they've been able to get from Bryce Miller, from Brian Wu, what they've been able to get in the bullpen out of Matt Brash, a guy who was starting a little bit for them last year. Like, these young guys are dominating on the mound, and they have kept this Mariners team that has gone through some major struggles in the offensive side right in it.
yeah. And we talked about the trade deadline. What they did, they traded their closer, Paul Sewald. He's a 33-year-old, and maybe part of that is because they know, hey, we've got like 4 other Paul Sewalds coming up in the next couple of years. Like we don't need the old one. We've got Andres Munoz. He's 24 years old and he throws 100 plus miles per hour. Like this bullpen is also fantastic to back up the starting staff. Um, I think this team, like you're saying, they're the yellow, but they're not so far back from the top 2 dogs in this division. Maybe if the beginning of the season had
Okay,
gone a
so
little bit differently,
what about this?
they'd be right there.
What about when Skittles had the green apple? Because green apple was probably number one, and then you had red, and then you had grape. They're the grape and the green apple pack.
I
Like,
did like Green Apple the best, I
th-
think.
yeah, I was gonna say that was an elite Skittles pack. When they got rid of the lime, brought in green apple, I loved that, and I like that. I think that's a better comp here. Give it 3 elite teams, and then the other 2.
Yeah,
We do need to point out I was wrong with the Mariners here in saying that they had upgraded at second base this year. Turns out Adam Frazier is the better second baseman than Colton Wong by a long shot.
yeah.
Colton Wong
They're
he fell back to earth and then some. He's about 5.5 feet under right now. So,
that's rude.
well,
You just buried Colton Wong on the podcast.
he's not dead. He's only 5.5 feet under.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, we didn't. The Mariners didn't get what they were thinking they were going to get from their offseason moves, but that never deters Jerry Dipoto. He's going to pivot. He goes out this trade deadline. He gets some new faces, new guys for the lineup, in like a Josh Rojas, a Dominic Canzone, who's already batting cleanup today for the Mariners. Like it's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of get some more offense from some of their players. I feel like they had some underperformers in the first half,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
a Julio, like a
Julio.
Cal Raleigh,
Yep.
a Suarez. Like those guys have shown they are good hitters, and they have been also playing better of late. So that is going to be key to
And
get those guys going.
you had the first quarter breakout of Jared Kelnick, and then he kind of hit a slump, and then he kicked a water cooler and broke his foot. But then you've had, I think, the guy that is the most underappreciated player in baseball, like the most underappreciated good player in baseball. JP Crawford has been the glue that has held this team together throughout the entire season. Like,
He's actually like having his best year of his career this year.
yeah, um, by a long shot. Like,
Yeah.
he's a shortstop. He is. He's not going to come out here and he's not the Johnny Peralta shortstop either. Like, he's got 10 home runs, and that feels like a lot for him. But he's hitting the ball. He's running the bases well. He's taking a crap ton of walks at 15% walk rate, which is just insane. A 366 average with a 379 on base percentage. Like, he's on base always, and it's more often by something that's not a base hit. But he's a very good defender. Um, and this has been his best season yet. And he had a breakout last year. Like, we can't even call this a breakout for him because that was last year. So
This is another level, though. Yeah, great
yeah,
season for Crawford.
so very, very happy if you're the Seattle Mariners and what you're getting out of Crawford, and you hope that he continues to improve and stay a huge part of this lineup as you get Julio and Cal to finally kind of come out of what they've been doing. And both those guys are still showing signs of what they can do. I mean, Julio's got 19 home runs and 27 steals. Cal Raleigh's got 20 home runs, a 10% walk rate. Like, they're still productive batters. They're just not what we know they can be. So, and and again, we're saying this for a team that is only 1.5 out of the wild card. They're only 6.5 out of the division. Like, they have a shot. They could make a run and move up to second. Maybe if everything goes perfect for them and not so perfect for Texas and Houston, could take the division. But I think a wild card is very much in sight for them.
Yeah, I'm not counting on them to really make a run in the division race. That's a lot of games to make up in
It
7
is.
weeks, and it's not like those teams ahead of them are they don't look like they're, prone to going in a massive tailspin and like, giving everything up. They look very solid right now.
Yeah. And my point wasn't that I would expect them to be in the division race, but they're not 100% out of it. There is still technically a chance. And this is a team that, given the chance, I think could take advantage of it. I just don't know that the chance is going to be there. So, um, but yeah, now we need to talk about the kind of less savory flavors of Skittle here, in the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, who is the orange Skittle. Well, the yellow Skittle if we're going with the green apple pack. This Angels team has been so weird. So weird this season. They're 59-60, -4 run differential. They're just they're the epitome of an average team, which I think is more than we could say from past years, right?
Yeah, I would say so because they had their superstars, Otani and Trout, and then they were surrounded by a ton of below average at bats. I think you sent me that article, Mike Petriello, about the number of at bats given to below average players, essentially.
Yeah.
And in years past, I'm sure the Angels had given a very large amount of
The
at bats
Angels
to.
in past years were likely pretty close to where the Royals are now, at 80% of their at bats going to players below 95 WRC plus.
Yeah. So that has changed, and we talked about the addition of depth, their Urshela's and their Renfros, and they went out and they made very solid moves. The thing that we just cannot avoid talking about is that they've just been crushed by injuries. We were looking at their opening day lineup. 5 guys from their opening day lineup are on the injured list, and many of them will not
And
even return this season.
a total of 17 players who were expected to make a significant impact on this major league team this season are on the IL. Like, you've got some of the young guns that had just debuted. They've not had much time, but they were expected to be a big piece of the bullpen. And Ben Joyce, he's been out since June. You've got what, 6 relievers in the IL, 3 starting pitchers, and then just out of the hitters, you've got Logan O'Hoppe, who was he was billed as the catcher of the future and still is. Max Stassi, their other catcher, Anthony Rendon, he's played more games in 2019 than he's played in his entire career with the Angels so far, just because of injuries. Zach Neto, I so that was true. I think that's still true because I think that was after he went on the IL this time where that stat came out.
I mean, I believe it. It's just funny when you say it like that.
Yeah. Zach Neto, who his when he's played has been really, really, really good for them over at short. Gio Urshela, Joe Adell, Mike Trout, Taylor Ward, all these guys are on the injured list, and all of these guys, maybe with the exception of Joe Adell, were expected to be big contributors for this Angels team as they tried to make a run at the division at the World Series for really the first and only time with Trout and Otani on the same roster. And it's just they've done everything right from a front office perspective to put themselves in the best position. And then they've just been screwed time and time again by bad luck and injuries. And I think this is the first time that I can look at this Angels team and Perry Manassian in the front office and go, you did your best. I'm actually quite proud of you. It just didn't work out, and it's really a bummer. Like, that's kind of how I
Yeah.
feel about the Angels this year. Like,
Yeah, they pulled out all the stops this year. They didn't sell at the deadline. They actually added in a big way. They said, "We don't care about the future. It's all in." And that's admirable in this situation.
and they
I
called
feel
up
like
all their good prospects and tried to plug them right in, and it worked for a while. Like,
Mhm.
they were making the moves they needed to do in order to do this thing right. And
Yeah.
then they got screwed.
Unfortunately, they seem to be so far back now, and they've got 3 great teams in their division ahead of them that they'll surely be playing a lot in the last month and a half. That it's just going to make things very difficult for this team
Plus Tampa
to
and
get back
Toronto
in
that
it.
have the other wild card spots.
Yeah,
So
there's just too many teams to leapfrog. It feels like
yeah, and so I think they're gonna go without the playoffs yet again, and then
they have
lose Otani.
actually. I was just curious about this. They have about $100 million coming off the books at the end of the season. So, say they don't sign Otani, which seems highly likely at this point.
Yeah,
Um, they have a lot of money to actually go out and make a new look Angels team and build around Mike Trout, I guess.
yeah, that's fair, and it's gonna be interesting to see how they do that because like they've they've done that pre-Trout, and it didn't pan out. And Josh Hamilton and Albert Pujols, and they spent big. And they got big names, and it didn't work out. So I'm going to be really, really curious to see moving forward how they work with their analytics department, and how Perry Manassian goes about building a contender around Trout without Otani.
I mean, it all starts from the way they draft, and if we know anything about the Angels, is that they are not very good at drafting, and
No,
they've been terrible at it in the last like 5 to 7 years here. Um, Mike
yeah,
Trout was essentially their only good first round pick that they've had in a very
and,
long time.
and Reed, but like even
Who?
then, like Reed Detmers,
Oh, yeah, he's been
like
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
he's promising.
he's still young enough that he could. There's some time there for him.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, like all their first rounders have been. But they do have Randall Grichuk back on the roster, though.
He actually has had a pretty good career, so
Yes, he
I
has.
guess give the Angels props there.
Yeah, I mean, back-to-back guys had good careers in Randall Grichuk and Mike Trout.
Was that Jerry
So
Dipoto?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, dang. All right. Well, we are over an hour and we have one team left. And we probably should have done the lime skittle or the orange skittle, if you will, uh, somewhere in the middle so that we weren't ending on a low note. But oh well. Um, the Oakland Athletics, like this is the team that doesn't make sense with this division. Like all the other teams have tried. They've made a lot of moves to upgrade their team. Um, the Angels have been mired by injury. Um, but you could say all four of those teams have good pieces, have a shot, are still technically contenders, and then you have arguably one of the worst teams in Major League history. The Oakland Athletics, as of today, are 33-85 with a minus 284 run differential. For reference, there are no other teams with a minus 200. They are the
Who's
only
second
one.
worst?
Second worst is I think it's Colorado at minus 180.
Okay.
Yeah, Colorado and then Kansas City at minus 160. So they are 104 runs worse than the next worst team by run differential.
Yeah.
And we gave them too much credit in the preview by saying that their rotation is not the absolute worst. That
It's
there's a couple of teams that probably have worse, and I think we were really thinking about the Rockies and the Royals when we said that. Well, we were very, very wrong. They are the
Hey, they have the
worst.
same rotation ERA as the Rockies today.
Okay, so the rotation is tied for the worst, but they're not like far and away the worst.
It's
Um,
above 6 for reference.
yeah, that's just. Ugh. At least the Rockies play in Colorado. Like that's what we could say for them. We can't
Yeah,
say
I was
that
looking
for
that up.
Oakland.
I'm kind of shocked that the Reds are still in it, considering they have the third worst rotation ERA in the league.
Yeah. But so this A's team, 30th in the MLB in runs scored, 50 runs less than Kansas City. 30th in MLB in runs allowed, 25 more than Colorado. They're on pace for 117 losses, which would be the second most all time to the 2003 Detroit Tigers that lost 119. And like I kind of was asking myself, how did we get to this point? Because at the beginning of the
Right.
season, this was a team that had some decent players on it. Like they weren't good. We knew they were going to be terrible, but how are they this bad? And it turns out that their entire opening day roster, like Gautam mentioned how many players in the Angels opening day lineup are still there, which is 4. Um, but the entire 26 man for the A's only has 10 players left from opening day. Like 4 guys on the IL. Ryan Noda, their best hitter. Carlos Perez, their second or their backup catcher. James Caprelli and Zach Johnson. They've DFA'd Jesus Aguilar, Ramon Laureano, Manny Pena, Jerry's Familia, and Adam Oller. Um, they traded away Shintaro Fujinami, Jace Peterson, and Sam Moll. And then there's a couple guys who are down in the minors, could come back up, and Connor Capel, Kyle Muller, Danny Jimenez. They actually DFA'd Domingo Acevedo, but he cleared waivers and ended up back in their minors. So this like it's easier to name players that are not still on the team than it is to name players that are still on the team. Gautam and I actually did that before the episode, and Gautam was only able to get 6 players that are on the current roster that were on the opening day roster. 6 out of 10. That and
Yeah,
this
I
is
want to take us back even further actually. 2 years ago today, August 13th, 2021, the A's were in the last wild card spot. They were literally in playoff position. They actually ended up blowing it that season, and that kind of started this cycle of losing. And that's when they sold off Matt Olson and Matt Chapman and Sean Manaea and Chris Bassett. And then the next season, they go out and they trade their best player in Sean Murphy.
yep,
And the players they've gotten in return have just been quantity over quality is
yeah.
the approach that they've taken. And
Christian
none of those
Pache,
guys, Christian Pache,
who is now
Esteury
on the
Ruiz,
Nationals.
he's on the Phillies.
The Phillies, sorry. He's now on the
Yeah.
Phillies, the other red one from the East.
But
But
yeah, Esteury Ruiz, who is the big prize of this year's trade. I mean, I'm not saying that he's a nothing and his career's over or anything, but he hasn't necessarily gotten off to quite the start the A's had to be looking for when
I
they
mean,
made this trade, right?
we comped him to Miles Straw, and that feels about what he is.
Terrible
And
hitter,
even
good
yeah,
defense, and really fast.
yeah, and he's
Yeah,
second in the league in steals. Like, there's some value there. Like, but he's not a headliner for a Sean Murphy trade.
no,
But,
and it's just like, what are they doing? I don't
uh,
get the direction of this club. Like, it doesn't make sense what they
so
do. They're just cheap.
if this team had a farm system, and the reason I say that is because they are currently, after the draft and the trade deadline, they actually fell from the 21st ranked farm system to the 23rd. That's after the draft and after the deadline where they traded away Jace Peterson, Shintaro Fujinami, and Sam Moll. They didn't
How's that
improve.
possible? Did they draft badly or
Yeah,
what?
they drafted badly. They didn't get anything back in the trades, and everyone else just did better than them. Like, this is a team that is the worst in baseball and is in the bottom 10 farm systems. There is no future with this team right now. Like, they're 2 years into a rebuild with no promise for the future. And it's this is all the ownership. This is an owner that I've been talking about it for weeks. He's destroying this team so that he could say people don't support it and move it because he thinks he's going to make more money somewhere else. Well, he's put this team in such a bad position that if they move to Vegas, Vegas isn't going to show up either. They don't have any reason to come to a game, just like they don't in Oakland. At least Oakland, whenever they say, hey, let's stick it to that guy, they pack the stadium. They had 37,000 fans there the other day. They had 27,000 fans on a Tuesday game against the Rays. Like, this is a city that can fill a stadium if the ownership and the team care. And this is a team and an ownership that do not care. Like, they don't
That
have
is
anybody
just
in the
so
farm system.
disappointing and so depressing. You telling me that there's no future for this club and there's
Like,
nothing there's nothing there. There's nothing to
I
be
mean,
excited about.
try and tell me I'm wrong. Like, there's
No,
positives to
I
this
I
team, but
agree.
the positives are like, I think they're fleeting moments. Like,
They're the
Zach
size of
Zach
Skittles.
Geloff
They're
Zach
nothing.
Geloff has been phenomenal for the A's here in the past couple weeks. 25 games played, 281 average, 8 home runs. He's already got the second most FWAR on the team for the season with 1.3. That is the positive for the A's. That's it. And Zach Geloff, could any of you tell me who he was before he debuted? The answer is no. He's not he's not a top prospect by any means. He's he's very possibly a really good young player that is maybe overlooked by a lot of people. He's showing that he can go out and play against major league pitchers at a pretty high level in a short time span, a small sample size here, but he's clearly got something, but he's not a franchise cornerstone player. They don't have people waiting in the wings to come and support him and build a core that could even be an average team. This is a team that for the next 5 years is going to be horrible. I honestly think at some point here in the next 2, 3 years, this team is going to surpass the 119 losses. I would not be surprised.
So you don't actually think they've bottomed out.
No, I
That's
don't think they
impressive.
bottomed out.
Like, how do you not bottom out when
They
you're on pace to lose 117?
Well, I could tell you exactly how. It's they still have like 3 players that are maybe worth something. And not not much, mind you,
I was
but
gonna say if they had any players worth anything, they would have traded them by now. It's
well,
not like
Shea Langoliers is a player that I think other teams would be interested in. He is a young catcher. He's got power. He's got a lot of whiff. He is Mike Zunino, but Mike Zunino, if you don't ask Guardians fans about it, has had a very solid career and has been a useful piece for the Rays, for the Mariners, even though the Mariners weren't really all that great at the time. Brent Rooker has a lot of power. I'm sure they could get something for him. Jordan Diaz is a really, really interesting young player. He's he's incredibly young. He's not had a whole lot of time in the majors, but I kind of feel like that guy could be kind of good. And then you've got Tony Kemp and Seth Brown, who I'm surprised weren't moved at the deadline. They're not. These are guys that are at best average major leaguers, but having an average major leaguer is better than having a below replacement level. So, and I think this A's team is on a track where they're going to have below replacement level players at every position at some point. And that's when they'll bottom out. They'll lose 120 games. There is no hope for this franchise with the current ownership, with the current front office.
Yeah.
I think that's why Bob Melvin was so willing to move. I think he saw that coming. And so when the Padres
Yeah.
said, "Hey, we want you," he said, "Absolutely."
You're talking like this, like I didn't realize it was this bad. Like I knew they were really bad, obviously, but like you putting it in this perspective is like, wow, this
There's a
is
reason they're the
not
lime
getting.
skittle.
They're not even a Skittle. There's
They're
no
they're an
redeeming
M&M
quality.
in a
They don't.
Skittles bag. Like they'd be
Yeah,
good in the Cape Cod League. Like you put
maybe.
an M&M in an M&M bag, it's pretty good. But put an M&M in a Skittles bag, and people tend to not like it. So I don't know. I just absolutely eviscerated the A's there.
You
Um,
really did.
wow.
What do you
I
do if
didn't.
you're an A's fan? Like your life is pretty bad right now.
I mean, yeah. And then they're trying to rip the team away from you too. Like it's so bad. I've been out here for a month. Like there's a reason I know so much about the A's. It's because I've literally been in A's territory for like what 3.5 weeks. Like it's bad. Like I talk to A's fans at work every day, and they're just uh, they're not over it. Like they want the team to stay, but they're at the point where they've basically been convinced it's not going to happen. They're not winning. They're not trying to win, and just there's no spirit left in the area. Like they're starting to go watch the Giants, but these are people who grew up watching the A's. They grew up loving the A's. The Ricky Henderson, Jose Canseco, Mark McGuire A's. The Mark Mulder, Catfish Hunter, Raleigh Fingers A's.
So I guess like the one thing that I can offer for hope is that they should have the number one pick in the draft, like maybe a couple years in a row here coming
Well, it's
up.
it's a lottery, so not
It's a lottery,
necessarily.
but they'll have the best shot,
Yeah,
and they should get a top three pick next like 3 years at least. And that's a great way to improve the system. And why did they have to draft badly? They have the same people in charge that drafted Matt Olson and Matt Chapman. Like, who's to say that they can't find some franchise altering players? Maybe they're not getting them through trades, but the draft is the way that they can build this from the bottom up,
I
basically.
I have a theory about why there's been such the drastic change in how they draft, but I think it's just more depressing stuff that I'm throwing on it. So maybe I'll hold off on that. But all right, but anyway, this is an incredibly interesting division here in the American League West. You've got three teams that are very much still in the race, and a fourth team that has tried everything they possibly can this year to compete. And given the situation that they've been dealt, has done a fairly good job at it, in my opinion. It's now down to the final, 40 games?
About you.
And so this is going to be a race to the end. Who is going to take the top spot? It. I feel like it's. This is more of a. You don't have to actually answer the question unless you want to. It was more of a rhetorical, but I'll leave that up to you. Um,
I'm taking the Astros.
all right.
I think they're gonna overtake the Rangers.
I actually am going to take the Rangers to or to keep the division. I think that something is Something's going to click. They have been on a slide, but I think it's going to click. They're going to get back onto a winning streak. Maybe build another game or two buffer, and hold that to the end. And this is going to be the first time that we see in years see a team not known as the Houston Astros take the division crown. But yeah, this is a great division to watch this year if you watch 80% of it. So I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope the Skittles analogy was a good one, because I kind of like it. I thought it was a good analogy. Hope you guys did too. Tell me which Skittles you would compare to each team on social media. I'm curious there. Since we didn't do a secret phrase, if you tell me which team is which Skittle on social media, I'll put you in the drawing. Which, by the way, 2 weeks in, still not a single entry. It's going to be very easy to win. Just pointing that out. But yeah, so we will be back here next week. Well, we'll be back streaming next week. I'll not be here. I'll be back at my parents' house. It'll be great. Make sure to check us out on social medias and Getaway Day Cards on YouTube, where I've been doing a lot of baseball card stuff. I think that is it for tonight. We will see you guys back here next week. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod. If you enjoy card collecting, check out our sister YouTube channel at Getaway Day Cards.